I know you've been tracking this, reading through a lot of different sources. We get the Joe Biden version, we get the Putin version, the truth probably somewhere in between. So, what could you tell folks about what's happened since this began and where things stand now? Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And in today's show, we're going to be digging into the Russia Ukraine war, at least getting an overview of what's happened since the beginning. Certainly not easy headlines to read through or digest at times, yet Gavriely, who has been tracking this situation, has joined me on the show a couple of times, also has his own YouTube channel where he talks about these things, as well as economics, is joining me. So, Rand, welcome on in. How are you doing, and how's everything going with you today?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I appreciate you being back on here. I know you've been tracking this, reading through a lot of different sources. We get the Joe Biden version, we get the Putin version, the truth probably somewhere in between. So, what could you tell folks about what's happened since this began and where things stand now?
Okay, so the way that I see things, the war started long before the war started. There was forces that caused this war to happen. And a lot of analysts discovered this. And for example, that Russia didn't want Ukraine to join NATO. And Ukraine for a long time has been trying to push to join NATO. America was pushing for Ukraine to join NATO. And in the end, this war started. Now, what we see now is instead of trying to solve this situation diplomatically and end the tragic loss of life, the West is pushing Ukraine more and more into extending this conflict with Russia, even that on the ground, they have mostly lost. The loss of life in Ukraine is tremendous. Just Zelensky came out yesterday and he said that they're losing over 100 men a day. And then he was like, so send us more weapons, send us more weapons. We need more weapons. No, what they need is to end this conflict diplomatically because the situation on the ground is basically lost. And extending this is only going to cost a lot more Ukrainian lives and Russian lives, of course. But the losses are a lot more heavier on the Ukrainian side. So the way that I see it, the West is pushing Ukraine to choose a path that is not good for them. For them, the way that I see it, it would be better to try to get to some kind of agreement. It's not going to be pretty. I mean, they are not going to come there from a point of strength, but at least they're going to save a lot of young men from dying. Other than that, of course, there is a big risk of starting something, you know, like World War III. I was thinking about it a lot. Are our leaders trying to actively start a world war? Because this is serious stuff. And we are talking about Russia is a country with 6,000 nuclear weapons. How can you act so irresponsibly, you know, with the way that the politicians in the West were calling for assassination of Putin and like crazy stuff, with a country that can retaliate with nukes, especially if like with the way Putin is trying to be portrayed in the West like a crazy man. Do you try to poke a crazy man with 6,000 nukes? So maybe send one on you. So that's like the big view. So the join of Sweden and Finland is just more of this aggression of NATO expansion. And let me tell you, I know a lot of people in Sweden. Until very recently, I lived in Sweden. I will probably live in the future in Sweden again. And most of the people that I talk to don't want to join NATO. So I think if there would be a referendum in the country, they would not be joining. But it looks like today in the West, we live in like the politicians decide for us, and it doesn't matter what we really want. That's my overview take of the things.
Well, I can certainly understand that. It does feel that way. And to what you mentioned, where whether people of Finland and Sweden, support it or not. Headline last week: Finland and Sweden formally apply to join NATO. So, along those lines, based on what you just said, is this something that conceivably could wind down, or there could be a resolution soon, or is it on the other hand? It feels at times as if is this leading to World War III? What would you say there?
I think the government in Washington is very aggressive because we've just seen what Biden said a few days ago to the Chinese. He was in a conference call, and one of the reporters asked him. She said something like, "Well, you didn't do a military action over Ukraine, but you did say that if China invade Taiwan, would you defend them militarily?" And he said yes. And he started, and I think Biden. I mean, we all know that he's like 90% brain dead. He's and I think he's sitting in all these meetings in the White House, listening to all these people talks, and he's basically just there because he's the president, but he's not really there mentally. So he's listening to all these talks, and then when he's asked by reporters, because he's the face of, he's the president, he's the one to have to go on these conferences. So when he's asked, he's just spitting out things that he listened in those conferences without thinking what he should say, because he's too old. He has gone through some brain surgeries, 2 or 3 of them already in the past, and his brain is not operating at such a fluent in such a fluent way anymore. And he just spits out the truth when he should have a poker face. No, we are not going to defend Taiwan. So he's increasing the tension between the US and China at the time that there is also high tension between the US and Russia. And obviously Russia and China are together. So I don't know, where exactly did they sit in the White House and talk about, can they really do 2 fronts, fight Russia and China at the same time? I mean, seriously, it's a war that they can't win. So either they are delusional and they think they can win this war, or I don't know, someone there is just not thinking what is he doing. And both situations are very dangerous, because the World War III could start. I hope it doesn't, because in that case, the loss of life will be unbelievable. Today with nuclear weapons and bioweapons, who knows where it's going to go. And Sweden make a big mistake. Sweden was a natural country for hundreds of years already. They didn't join in World War I, they didn't join in World War II, and that's why they were prosperous. But now that was a big mistake. And I think part of that is because a lot of countries in Europe are very, very dependent on the US. Like if the US says something, these countries do it. And the situation in Russia, look, it was Europe is basically committing suicide. Look at the strength of the euro. The euro is basically imploding since so before the war. The ruble, the Russian currency, is 55% stronger compared to the euro from its pre-invasion value. Not from this dip in the price for like 2-3 weeks that the ruble went down and then recovered. From before the invasion, the ruble is up 55%. And at the same time, and against the dollar is up almost 40% since before the war. And at the same time, commodities are up. So like oil is up 22% since February. Natural gas is up like 95% since February. Coal is up like 80% since February. So, and all of these things are things that Russia is selling. So Russia is the big winner from this entire conflict. So, and Europe is the big loser. So I don't know, maybe there is a conspiracy to try to destroy Europe, because Europe is just committing suicide, economic suicide from this entire thing.
Well, I can certainly understand feeling that way. You look at some of these headlines here now: Russia is suspending gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria. Natural gas surges above $9, hits high since 2008. We already had a somewhat fragile situation, and this does not seem to be helping it. Although, Ran, here's what I wonder if this is what it comes down to. You mentioned how it doesn't seem as if Biden is maybe the one making all of these decisions. I think that may be the case with a lot of the different countries for a long time. It seems certainly after the past 2 years, we've learned more about Davos and the World Economic Forum. This year, Russia dominates Davos World Economic Forum, which met this week, even as Russians go missing. So apparently they were not invited this year. Although in past years, even last year, here was Vladimir Putin speaking at the World Economic Forum. So what do you think is really going? Is Putin also following this script? It's just hard to know what's real. Do you have any thoughts on what Russia's
Well, if I put a little
involvement
bit
would
my
be?
conspiratorial hat, I think Putin is not part of the WEF. And the reason that I think that is, listen to his speeches on the WEF. I listened to 2 speeches. In one speech, he said he was warning. He was giving a warning that tension between countries today, and today that was like 2 years ago. I think that was a speech from 2020. He said the tension between the countries is very similar to the tension before the World War II. And he was giving all sorts of examples why, you know, why is that? And he was explaining that the economy is going to collapse, and because of the economy will collapse, the Western leaders will blame other countries. So he has been spot on. Look, the Western economies are collapsing not because of the invasion to Russia, even that the invasion made prices rise much faster, commodities become more expensive. Yeah, it made it worse, but everyone know that this started before. Prices were rising before that, and Putin obviously knew that, and he was giving the warning. Now, the second video that he was on WEF, he said that it's very obvious that globalization failed, and you know, breaking nation states didn't work. So it seems that he is not part of this attempt to globalize the planet, wipe out, you know, how do you say it? Like, he's very patriotical to his country, like wiping out this kind of, like making the world like a one country state. He meant that has failed. And that is what the WEF is all about. The WEF is about creating this one mega country that is controlling everything. You will own nothing and you will be happy about it, making some new way of mega communism where the state own everything and you don't own anything. And it seems that Putin is not a part of that. Now, is Putin a hero? Definitely not, but he's not, I think he's not a part of this WEF group. And if he was in the past, he's definitely not today.
All right. Now, something else that you and I touched on last time, would be curious if you've had any updated thoughts, because here's Victoria Nuland talking about some biolab facilities that some have speculated that's what Putin was really upset about. And we'll play this for folks who haven't heard it and then take your comment on that.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian troops, Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of.
Now, I'm sure Putin would say the same thing in the other direction, but any idea of whether these are dangerous facilities, is that justified? Is that what Putin's going after? And anything that you've learned about that since then?
Well, for what I know, it depends what happened from here on. Is Russia gonna take the Donbas area and maybe go for Odessa, and that's where the war is gonna finish? Or are they gonna try to take over the entire country? If they take over the entire country, they will have more access to these labs, even that, you know, since everyone knows, since this war has been going on for months now, if there is any labs that are west of Russia, they could have already like destroyed any important information. Now, I do know that the Russian did take over one lab, and they said that they took documents from there that are proving that there was that they were developing bioweapons, but I have not seen any further developments on that. So we will have to keep an eye on that. And you know, because this is also some kind of a game of poker. Maybe the Russians, it seemed to me that if this was a game of poker, the Americans just through, they show all their hands like at the start. They put all the sanctions, they went all in, and the Russians seem to be a little bit more, saving some things for later. So we will just have to see what happens in the next few months and what is the developments, because maybe they're keeping it as a bargaining weapon against the US for later. Like, you have to, get us to this and that behind the scene, and we will not release it, or maybe they will release it. So we will have to just wait and see what will happen.
Well, in terms of one potential move that we've seen some degree of, last we heard Ronan Manley was writing about how there was discussion of a further backing of the ruble with gold and possibly other commodities. Again, seems like a work in progress, but anything you could comment on there?
Well, that the move by Russia was genius, and that shows that gold is real money. It shows how strong the ruble has become by these two moves. The first move was the Russian central bank said, we are gonna buy gold and this price. And at the start, everyone was laughing at them. What? The market price is below your buying price. Like, you are buying it for below market. And I immediately said, well, this is only because the ruble collapsed in the last week. If you go a week before, well, the price that they're offering is actually above market price for a week before. So why should the ruble be so much down in a week? What happened? Because there is some imaginary sanctions that can't really do anything. Russia is holding all the commodities that Europe needs. So to me, immediately it looked like a strong move, and I've been proven right. The ruble has become stronger by this. It's not the gold standard, but you can say that it's halfway there.
Well, I mean, at least there's something backing it when they're talking about commodities as opposed to the...
And I just remembered, Russia said that if they keep getting sanctioned from the West, they will say that they can't buy any more commodities or gas, coal with rubles. They will have to pay with gold. And so I actually shared it on my Twitter, and I said, if Russia is saying this, then first of all, it shows you that Russia knows the value of gold. Russia knows the power of gold, and they know that there is a scheme to suppress its price with paper, because if you actually have to pay gold to buy things, then the scheme of how much gold there is compared to how much paper will be unveiled immediately. So that is like the nuclear financial weapon. And if the Russian said that to the West, it means that someone up those central banks in the US, in Germany, in France, they also know that. That's a warning. It says to, like, if you really want to play tough, that's our next move. Are you ready for our next move? Because that is basically a checkmate. I mean, that's it. That's over for the Western economies, because Russia has been collecting gold, and gold will be devalued much higher compared to all these other currencies, because they will start bidding for physical gold to pay for oil. Now, this is really funny. For example, because Finland joined NATO, and Finland also refused to pay rubles for gas. Then Russia said, okay, we are not going to sell you gas anymore. And they closed the pipeline. So Finland said, no problem, we are going to buy from Estonia. But where is Estonia getting the gas from? It's getting it from Russia. So all of these Europeans, it's just a big joke. And it's the same with and they're going to pay more for it, because instead of getting this gas through a pipeline, which is really cheap, they're going to get it through like a container ship, which is a lot more expensive. And the same situation with Germany. They have reduced some of their dependency on Russian oil that is coming through pipeline, and instead they're buying Russian oil through container ships, and they're like, they're cheating and saying that this is not Russian oil, but they're not saying where is it coming from. And a lot of people are speculating, and it's probably like 99% true, that this is Russian oil, because where did they get this amount of oil from a different source? And if they did, then they would say where. So it's all a game of it's all fake. And another something funny that the Europeans did, they said, we are not paying in rubles because you need to open an account with the Gazprom bank, and when you pay for oil, and a lot of gas and oil companies in Europe has opened an account with the Gazprom bank. But what they say is, let's say the price of the gas is I don't know, some amount in ruble, and there is a conversion rate from euro. So they say that they pay the euro amount and from their part that's it, transaction complete from their part. Like they just ignore mentally that the Russians are taking those euros and converting it into ruble. They say, we pay euro, you do with it whatever you want. Like it's only a, like a technical thing. Instead of them buying the ruble and then paying, they say, we give you euro and then you go buy the rubles and pay. So it's all technical things to say that, to tell their people, like, you see, we are tough on Russia, or we are not buying in ruble, or we are not getting Russian gas, and then they are getting it from the same Russian gas, just from a more expensive way to, transfer it. So they are totally dependent on Russia. To disconnect from Russia is a death sentence for the European economy. So it's only either war, which war is just much worse, or this is going to go away because the European economy will just collapse.
Well, certainly is an unfortunate set of circumstances for just about everyone involved. Of course, then you mentioned the gold element and even the people who are seeing the debasement of the currencies while the inflation has finally arrived. Yet gold actually down over the past 2 months in the face of all of that. I know the Fed's raising interest rates, also not making things easy yet. Either case, Ran, I sure appreciate you joining me here to help break that down. At least give folks a better idea of what's happening, because certainly it can be heavy to dig into on a day-by-day basis. And before we wrap up, can you just let folks know how they can find you? I know you have a YouTube channel and you're on Twitter, and for people who would like to stay up to date on what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. You can find me on Ran Gavriely on YouTube, or Gavriely Ran on Twitter. That's my tag.
All right. And we will have the link to that in the description field below. So thank you again, Ran. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Rhys.
And thanks to everyone watching at home. Hope that was helpful. And before we wrap up, though, I did see one note as I was getting ready to finish this recording. This was on Thursday of this week. Russia calls for lifted sanctions amid global food crisis, continues its strikes in Ukraine. Russia pushed back on its sanctions from the US and European nations on Thursday as a growing food crisis worsens, with Kyiv unable to ship grain and other agricultural products due to the conflict. The ongoing war in Ukraine, one of the world's largest exporters of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, is engendering world food supplies. That's according to the Associated Press, although certainly have heard several other folks echoing similar comments. And weird situation where you don't want to necessarily alarm people, but to the degree that some of these things are happening, hope everyone is just taking the appropriate precautions. Although before we wrap up tonight, did want to mention that there was some news out from Reina Silver and Jorge Romero Monroy, who we'll be having on the show next week, possibly with Dr. Pino Magal. We'll see how that goes. But they are commencing their exploration program at Medicine Springs, as well as providing an update of their other two projects. And to hear a quick sample from Jorge, here you go.
I'm happy to share with you our plans for exploration at Medicine Springs for this year. We started our drill permitting a few weeks ago, and we believe that we'll have those permits in hand in a few weeks. And our plan is to start drilling Medicine Springs towards the end of Q3 or beginning of Q4. Our budget is for 5,000 to 7,000 meters. And we're very happy to begin. What we see at Medicine Springs geologically is the possibility for a fully preserved CRD system that has size. Already before we put any drill holes on the property, we see 10 of the 13 traditional hallmarks of a CRD system. And the purpose of our drilling is to really ascertain the magnitude of the project. It's a project that we happy to bring forward in Reina Silver to complete what we like to call the trident of 3 high-grade silver and district-scale exploration properties.
So that is today's news. Hope you found that helpful. And to understand a little bit more about what's happening in terms of the ruble pricing, throughout this Russia-Ukraine war? Well, that's what we talked about with Bill Holter last week, and that call is coming your way now.